It's it's not that anyone and everyone can have access. The Madhurya Leela pastimes of Lord Krishna and his associates are reserved for the highest section of liberated souls, right? But so then this is where the specialty of the Adarya Leela pastimes of the Lord come in. That is referring to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. As Adarya Leela here explained, this Adarya is referring to this generous, magnanimous mood of the Lord, right? This mood of extreme benevolence, all very inclusive. Everybody has a chance, right? It's the focus is on distribution, mercy, giving everyone an in, right? And so and so Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his pastimes are predominated by this mood, right? He's like recruiting, trying to bring people in, right? And this is why we don't think to have direct access to Lord Krishna, direct connection, but it is through the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, right? That is our line. So yeah, so it's I'm just so inspired. We have both Madhuri Leela and Audari Leela here in the room. Okay, well, without further ado, and maybe I will stream to Facebook again, which we have been doing last few meetings, if I can find it. Um, 1 second here, I've got some static going on. Is someone's mic on, or is that me? I'm hearing some static, but I can't see where. Oh, okay, I found it here. Okay. Um, okay. So I'm gonna go to live stream. Magyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitanjena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So I'm just setting things up here. Okay. Well, thank you all for being here today. It's a very important day, as I mentioned. We're remembering His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Śrīdhar Dev Goswami Maharaj. He is our Param Guru, right? The Guru of our Guru, our grandfather Guru. He is the founder of this divine mission, which we're all aspiring to be a part of, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat. And beyond that, he is a Vaishnava and a saint of the highest caliber. And our Gurudev, he would caution his disciples, when you're going to glorify the great Vaishnavas, we have to think about, what position we have to glorify, actually. So we are very careful in contemplating what are the glories of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj and how we can act, like what right do we actually have to express them, right? And so we can rather inform our glorification with the glorification of those who are actually qualified, to give glorification. Because Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj's position is that he was honored and celebrated by the highest level of Vaishnavas, right? And his guru was Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, right? The founder of the Gaudiya Math and the inaugurator of the Renaissance of Gaudiya Vaishnavism in the modern age, right? Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur started this modern wave of Krishna consciousness and the Sankirtan Yajna of these times. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was the guru of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, and he had the highest regard for him, right? And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he joined the mission as a young man, and he always had a very saintly nature, you know, from his childhood. You know, we hear from that from very young, you know, we hear stories about his saintly nature. There was one period when he was maybe around 10 years old, and he decided that he just wanted to eat neem, you know, this very bitter leaf that is used in Ayurvedic medicine. He just would eat this like boiled neem leaf sabji with rice, you know. This went on for some months or something. And his mother was heartbroken, you know, her son was eating like that. And so from a very young age, he was very renounced. We also hear that he had this natural attraction to the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Oh, that's Swarnangi, Didi. Dandavad. Jai Swarnangi.
Hi, Dandavad. It's nice to see you.
Oh,
I
great
hope
to
to
see
see
you
you
too, Didi.
soon, someday. We want to see you.
I hope so too.
Me too. Bye, Dandavad.
Dandavad, Didi, Dandavad. Jai Swarnangi, Didi ki jai. Śrīla Mahārāj actually started the first Sankirtan congregational kirtan in his village, Hapanya, right? Where we now have a temple. Our Gurudev established a temple there. And Śrīla Śrīdhar, he was maybe around 18 years or something like that. He was inspired to start this Nagar Sankirtan, like village, going through the village. He collected a group and they did this Maha Mantra, Harinam, going through the village. And our Gurudev actually established a small temple to honor that very spot where Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj started that kirtan. So from a young age, you know, he had this inclination to pure devotion, and particularly the movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he came from a very high Brahminical lineage, right? They grew up in his house speaking Sanskrit, right? Many of his relatives, they were very learned in Sanskrit. You know, he learned Sanskrit at a young age. So, you know, this was the kind of background that he came from. And he, you know, he started his early years like any average person. He got a degree in law. And it was during his university days that he started his search, right? We hear of this one occasion when he had a very good friend. He would discuss philosophy with him, and one day they were out for a walk together, and his friends mentioned, he referred to his father as that gentleman, and like, you know, in this kind of impersonal way, that gentleman. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj is quite shocked about that. And you know, how, especially in the Indian culture, right? How can you talk about your father like that? And that friend of his explained, you know, well, yes, maybe that wasn't so respectful, but really that's our relationship, right? That I had a, you know, he's my father in this lifetime, but in my previous lifetime and my next lifetime, I don't know. We are just crossing paths in this lifetime, right? And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj said this was like an epiphany for him. It threw him into this state of shock, actually. And for many days, he was really contemplating this because he was suddenly feeling like, what's my real purpose, right? Why am I really here? What's my real purpose? What real stability do I actually have, right? Everything in this world is so fleeting, right? Oh, my friends, my family members, my occupation, it's all changing and all moving. What is actually of permanence? What is actually of significant meaning, right? Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was thinking about all these things very deeply. And then it was, I believe it was another friend who shared this book with him about the life and teachings of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he said when he received that book, he said he devoured it like nectar. And he said, in hearing about Mahaprabhu and his message of divine love, he suddenly felt like, oh, here is purpose, here is meaning. Now I found some place, right? And reading about Sambandha, right? Sambandha Gyan, right? Having clear understanding of what is what, who is who, what is the proper nature of things. Like suddenly everything clicked into place. And so Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he got some relief, right? In this anxiety that he was feeling. But then he also realized, oh, but I need a guru, right? And so then he began his search, right? And we hear about different encounters that he had in that search for the bona fide guru. And there were different incidents on that journey, but finally he came to hear of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and when he first had his darshan, he was captured. There's one place he describes, seeing I think it was when Saraswati Thakur was returning to the ashram after some Sankirtan in Kolkata. Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj saw him for the first time, and he was captured by his presence. And so he was associating with the Gaudiya Math it was maybe like 1 year or 2 years that he was visiting before he decided to take initiation. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he described that he was always a very acute listener, right? Excuse me. He was always a very acute listener. And so he would, and he always had this very, consistently through his whole life, he had this very shy, quiet, reserved nature. He referred to himself as a back-pushing man. And so, he never wanted to come to the front. He never wanted any position, this was something very prominent in his nature, and there's one recording of him in his later years where he's speaking about this and saying, you may find it hard to believe, but since my childhood, whenever anyone would praise me, I would feel some pain within my heart. It makes me uncomfortable when people praise me. That was his genuine feeling. And he also expressed how that all he aspired for was to have a small circle of like-minded souls around him with whom he could discuss the inner meaning of the scriptures, and in a very quiet way go on with his life of devotion. That was sincerely his authentic mood, right? And always avoiding the spotlight, right? So anyhow, in those early days when he was still like kind of exploring and hearing, he would go regularly for the classes, discussions at the Gaudiya Math and hear from Saraswati Thakur. He would always sit at the back and he would listen very, very intently, very quietly and very intently. Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj mentioned, I was always a very acute listener, right? But he was so focused in his listening, right? Simply because he's so sincere and earnest in his desire to understand the message. It was to such an extreme that some of the members of the Gaudiya Math, they became suspicious of him. Can you imagine? They're just so unused to seeing someone listening with so much keen attention. And there was one person there, one member of the Mott. He actually thought he was a spy. This is another interesting fact, right? That the movement of the Gaudiya Math and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and also the active years in the mission, in the preaching of Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj, this was all going on at a very chaotic time in the history of India, right? This is in the time of Gandhi's movements, right? This is in the years leading up to the partition of India. This is 1930s India. So it was a very chaotic time in India. All these, there was a lot of political unrest and resistance against the British rule. So much was going on. And so this one, Kirtanananda was his name, I recall. He actually thought that Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was a spy of the British government. And so he started like watching out for Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj with a lot of suspicion. And finally, and there was one occasion, I think it was that the class was going on an upper level, right? And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj came a little early. And he just, he had been coming already for some months or something. So he's feeling at home. And he came a little early for the class, something like that. He went in straight ahead to this room where the talk was going to take place. And this Kirtanananda, he was feeling this suspicion about him, and he went to him and told him, he kicked him out, and he said, you can't just walk in like this. You have to come at exactly the right time, something like that. And so he kicked him out. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was, naturally quite disturbed, and he went for a walk in the city, and he was feeling very sad about this. But then he thought to himself, and then for a moment he's thinking, oh, I won't go back, naturally. But then he thought more about it, and he thought to himself, well, if there's something of value there, then even if they beat me with a broomstick, then I should go back, right? If there's something valuable there, there's something for me to gain, then I should be ready to tolerate anything, right? And he said, on the other hand, if they want to put me on a throne, but there's nothing of value there, then I have no business there, right? I'm not looking for prestige. I'm not looking for a position, but I'm sincerely looking for truth. So wherever I can find truth and whatever I have to go through, I will go through that, right? And so in that mood, he went again the next day, and he continued, with his hearing. And, we can also remember that this is in the early days of the mission of the Gaudiya Math, right? Later on, it became more of a powerful, glorious mission in India. But this was still in the early days. And this may have even been before they even had a proper temple. It may have just been a rented apartment that they had. But it was a simple affair. So that's another point to remember, right? And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he mentioned himself, he said, I didn't join for the building, I didn't join for some, great, glorious mission, but I came because of what I was hearing. I came because of the substance that was coming from our Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. That's what I came for. So he was always very focused on that, right? And then ultimately Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he after, I think it was about a year or so, he was associating, listening. Then he decided to take initiation, and he, officially joined and was full time in the mission. And he, very quickly, others in the mission, they recognized what a learned person he was. He was already, writing Sanskrit compositions. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he always had this very fine capacity for hearing and comprehension, right? And And remember, Saraswati Thakur, for those of you who have looked at some of the talks of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, you'll see how difficult they are, right? Very, very difficult. Some of them are written or were spoken or written originally in English. And so we can see, right, the original material, but very, very high level English and difficult to understand. And you know, his Bengali, of course, was the same. And so many of his own disciples, they struggled with understanding. And so Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was one of very few disciples who could understand their Guru Maharaj. And we hear particularly Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, and another godbrother, Ananta Vasudev, who was kind of seen as being number one in terms of the Siddhanta, right, the philosophy. So Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj and Ananta Vasudev, they were like the two who were honored as having this deep understanding of what their guru was talking about. And so often after Srila Saraswati Thakur would give a talk, then you know, some of the other disciples would come and circle around them. Oh, can you tell us, like, what did our guru just say? Gangali is asking, what was Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj's name before initiation? That's a very good question. So he had a family name, Ramendra, right? Ramendra Chandra Bhattacharya, I think it was. And when Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj took initiation, Saraswati Thakur just made a slight adjustment to Ramendra Sundar, right? And he also, and another interesting point is that when after Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj received initiation, some of the other disciples asked him, oh, what explanation did he give about your name? Because remember, so the name Ramendra, right? This Rama, it's a tricky word. It's also in the Maha Mantra because it has many different meanings, right? And so this Rama, you know, sometimes some people see it as referring to Lord Ramachandra. Some people see it as referring to Balaram, Krishna's brother. But in our conception, this Rama is actually referring to Krishna as the beloved of Radharani, because Rama also means pleasure, right? And so in our conception, in the Rupa Nuga line, the acharyas in our line, they explain that Rama is referring to Radha Raman Krishna, right? Krishna who gives Rama pleasure to Radharani. And so Saraswati Thakur, he gave this explanation to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj when he gave him initiation. And so Ramendra Sundar, that was his name. Then would have been like a few years after initiation. So Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he ultimately became a leading preacher, right, in the Gaudiya Math. He received sannyas, right? And he traveled all over India, spreading the message and representing the Gaudiya Math. And so then there was another occasion. Śrīla Saraswati Thakur, he had this one wonderful mission of establishing the Padapit, it's called. Like Padapit is referring to the footprints of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because Mahaprabhu traveled all over India, right? And so Saraswati Thakur had this beautiful vision of establishing 108 footprints of Mahaprabhu, marking all of these places that he traveled, or at least the principal places that he traveled to throughout India. And he started that. It's actually an ongoing mission. He established, I don't know, was it like 30 or something? He established some. That number could be completely wrong. I was looking into it a while ago, but I've forgotten all the figures. Saraswati Thakur established that mission, and he started it. And now ISKCON and perhaps some other missions, they're slowly continuing it, but it's still, you know, still a long way from its conclusion. So anyhow, I went to see those footprints. If you Google it, you'll be able to see some some pictures. They established these beautiful, like Murtis, deities of the feet of Mahaprabhu with some plaque, right? And in some cases, there will be a temple even that was established there to mark that place. It's one of my dreams to, follow that trail one day. Let's see if it's possible in this lifetime. So anyhow, so then at one time, one mission. Oh, thank you, Ananda Krishna. 26. Wow. 26 out of 108. Still a long way to go. But anyhow, so at one time, Srila Saraswati Thakur, he specifically gave this mission to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj to identify the place of the Ramananda Samvad, right? So the Ramananda Samvad is referring to this important conversation, right, that took place between Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai, right? And this is a discussion that is recorded, right, in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And it's a very important historical conversation that covers the entirety of theology as presented in the Vedas, right, or in the Vedic texts. So it's a very important discussion, and it was very dear to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj also. So at one time, Saraswati Thakur gave this very important mission to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj to identify the exact place where that conversation took place, and then to establish the Padapit there. To establish these footprints of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu there. And also a temple. Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj also established Gaudiya Math there, which is still standing today. Beautiful Gaudiya Math. What is Kabur? Kabur is the name of that place. Where that, on the banks of the Godavari River, that's where it took place, which is actually technically, and Suvasini can correct me, Andhra Pradesh, right? It's I always think of it, we always refer to it as South India, but technically it's not quite South India. I think it's called Andhra Pradesh, that particular region of India. And we'll ask Suvasini to correct if I'm wrong. But anyhow, so Śrīla Saraswati Thakur gave there is a point to why I'm saying all of this right now. Saraswati Thakur gave this mission to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj to identify this place. And at that time, Saraswati Thakur also changed his name to Ramananda Das. Right. So this is highly significant, right? So from that time, oh, right. So this was before he took sannyas, actually. I'm sorry. This was before I had the chronology wrong. This would have been before he took sannyas. He was Ramendra Sundar. Then he became Ramananda Das at that time. And then later, after he took sannyas, of course, he became Srila Bhakti Rakshak, or Sri Bhakti Rakshak Śrīdhar, Tridandi Swami, Bhakti Rakshak Śrīdhar. Which is also very significant. We can talk about that too. So Ramananda Das, right? This is quite extraordinary, right? Showing his connection with Ramananda Rai. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj always had this very deep affinity for Ramananda Rai and for this important conversation that took place, And this was something that was very deeply meaningful to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj because, this resonated with him so much. And so you will actually see in some of his compositions, even after he took sannyas, he actually refers to himself as Ramananda Das, right? So even after his name had been changed to, Śrīdhar Swami, he still identified very much with that name of Ramananda Das, a servant of Ramananda. And you'll see in the Prema Dhamma Deva Stotram, one of his wonderful compositions, and also in the introduction to his commentary on Sharanagati, the songbook of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he refers to himself as Ramananda Das, right? So it was a very important connection for him, right? But then if we go on to his sannyas name, this name is also very significant. Bhakti Rakshak Śrīdhar. It's very that was the name, the sannyas name that Saraswati Thakur chose for him. This is also very high significance. So Śrīdhar, right? Śrīdhar Swami is actually the name of a very important commentator on the scriptures, very important Vaishnava commentator. This is going back maybe like 1,000 years, maybe someone can correct me, but I would estimate around 1,000 years before the time of Mahaprabhu, so going back around 1,500 years from now. And so this Śrīdhar Swami, great exalted Vaishnava and also scholar, he gave very, high literary Vaishnava interpretations of important scriptures, especially Srimad Bhagavatam. And so Śrīdhar Swami, he's like a universally honored Vaishnava scholar and commentator on the scriptures. So he's, highly honored for his level of scholarship and understanding of the scripture. And so it was very significant that Saraswati Thakur gave this name of Śrīdhar to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. Śrīla Saraswati Thakur recognized how deeply learned and insightful Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was. There was one occasion where Śrīla Saraswati Thakur referred to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj as Shastra Nipun, right? Nipun is referring to expertise, right? So he referred to him as having this profound understanding and expertise in the Shastra, in the scripture, right? That was one statement that Saraswati Thakur made about him. There was another occasion when Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he wrote this composition glorifying Bhaktivinoda Thakur in a very extraordinarily wonderful way. Bhakti Vinod Viraha Dashakam. It was the first composition that he wrote after joining the Gaudiya Math, and quite extraordinary. You can find it in our Kirtan guide, and also it's in the back of Prapana Jivanamrita Bhakti Vinod Viraha Dashakam. Maybe we can even go through it a little today. Well, maybe not. We don't have so much time. But when Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, when Saraswati Thakur read that composition, he was so pleased to the point where he said, "Now I am confident that when I leave this world, one man will remain behind who understands what I came for." Like, to that extent, right? Saraswati Thakur appreciated not only his knowledge, but also his wisdom and his profound understanding of the inner purport of the scriptures, and the inner the particular mission of Saraswati Thakur himself in coming to this world. He had this confidence. Oh, he gets me. He understands me, right? And so we can understand why he chose this name for him, Śrīdhar, when choosing his sannyas name. Then the other important name in Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj's sannyas title is Rakshak, or Rakkak, if you're saying with Bengali pronunciation. This is a very important word too. This Rakshak, it means like a guardian, right? A protector. Right? So, so then you have Bhakti Rakshak, and then this came out in English by the inspiration of Bhakti Siddhar Goswami Maharaj as the guardian of devotion, right? So that's why you see this title sometimes, and they also established this publishing press, Guardian of Devotion Press, right? So Bhakti Rakshak, it literally means guardian of bhakti, of devotion. And then this is also indicating connection with Jiva Goswami, right? Because Jiva Goswami, the great philosopher amongst the six Goswamis, he is known as having this particular mood of guardianship and protection because somebody actually has to do that job, right? Somebody has to stand for the dignity of what these teachings are. Somebody has to protect the purity of these teachings. Somebody has to protect the actual meaning of these teachings, and so on. Like that's an actual necessary seva, right? It's not just about going on with the practices, but we also have to, whenever there's a mission, then you also have to think about its relationship with the world, with outsiders, and also within the mission to maintain, to preserve, to protect the real meaning of these teachings and how they will be applied and so on. And so that requires a particular mood of devotion, which not many actually have. Not only mood, but the capacity as well. And so Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was of that nature and of that quality as well, of being a protector, right? Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he had this very deep understanding of his Guru Maharaj, of the teachings of Mahaprabhu and so on. But he also had a very strict and very stern nature. And he had this mood of protection also. He was someone of zero compromise. He was not someone who compromised, right? We are very fortunate because we have connection with Srila Govinda Maharaj, and he was very merciful. He made many compromises so that people like us could have an opportunity to practice all of this. But that was not Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's nature. No, he was very strict. He was very exclusive, right? And very fine, to the point where if he needed to, he would ask his own, god brother to leave his temple. That happened before. That happened in the case of his beloved god brother, Krishnadas Babaji, because Krishnadas Babaji was mixing with some style of kirtan, which didn't represent the purity of Saraswati Thakur's mission. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj had to ask him, look, if you're staying in my temple and you're mixing with this questionable kirtan outside, that's not going to work. You cannot stay with me. I'm representing something, right? So he had to ask his own godbrother to leave the temple, right? And there on some other points, right? There are certain things, like I'll give you an example. Now this very popular festival called Julan Yatra, it's approaching. Maybe it's like in another week or two. You can see it in our calendar. Julan Yatra, this is referring to the swing festival, when they swing deities of Radha and Krishna. And, it's a very cute and charming and nice thing to do, right? Who doesn't like a swing? Who doesn't like swings? Everybody likes swings. So it's a very popular festival, but it's also, it's a little, it's a kind of thing that can lead to how can we say it reduces. It's very easy to reduce what this is, reduce the profundity, right? It can lead to this mentality of reducing Radha and Krishna to dolls that you're swinging on a swing. How can we actually swing Radha and Krishna? We cannot, only in our imagination, right? So obviously, there's nothing wrong with the festival, and a very exalted Vaishnava, they can actually swing Radha and Krishna. That would be like a very profound meditation for them. But if we're not on that level, then it's very easy for it to just turn into some, cute little thing to do that you do with dolls, right? It turns into some very sentimental activity. And so it was something that Saraswati Thakur did not allow, did not practice in his mission. But later on, because it is something that draws a crowd, right? Then later on, after Saraswati Thakur left the world, many of his disciples, they did establish that within their temples. And it goes on today in many, authentic missions of the Gaudiya Math, no disrespect, But that was something that Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj would not make any compromise on. And he even made some comment, that, I tried to be even more careful than my guru was, right? He was so strict, so careful, right? His temple, Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj had some godbrothers who were very wealthy, who had many, many followers. But Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj himself, he always just had a handful of devotees in his temple. Temple was very poor. And that was because, nobody could stay there because Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was so strict and so simple, right? There was, zero comfort, zero luxury and very high standard, right? That was Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. Like, it was difficult to stay with him. We couldn't have handled it, right? We could not have handled it. And that was something Srila Govinda Maharaj mentioned, right, at one time. So Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he had this nature of a protector, and very strictly upholding the standard of the Goswamis, actually. He actually lived in the style of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, eating very, very simple and living a very simple and exclusive life of pure devotion, right? And then, so he spent many years in the Gaudiya Math, very active in preaching. But then, after his Guru Maharaj, after Saraswati Thakur left the world, as is, often the case, the mission fell into chaos. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj tried his best to help the situation, but ultimately saw he could not do anything and he withdrew. And that, was also his natural inclination anyhow, to stay very quietly, as we mentioned earlier, and in a solitary way, go on with his practice. He actually went into hiding in Navadvip for some time because some of his godbrothers, they wanted him to become the head of a new mission. But that was never his desire, right? And another point of great significance here is that when Saraswati Thakur was leaving the world, he gave an indication that this line, Rupa Nuga Dada, right? Some of you will have heard this term before, Rupa Nuga Dada. This is referring to the current coming from Rupa Goswami, the line of pure devotion coming through the hearts of Rupa Goswami and his followers, right? In the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so Saraswati Thakur indicated that Saraswati Thakur didn't leave any particular, clear appointment, right, for how the mission was going to go on. He didn't appoint a successor or anything like that. But in the last hours before he left the world, he was calling some of his leading disciples. He was giving some particular instructions, and also he was asking some disciples to sing different songs. Then at a certain point, he called for Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, and he requested him to sing this song, Shri Rupa Manjari Pada, right? Very significant moment, because this song, Shri Rupa Manjari Pada, this is a song by Narottam Thakur, and it is something like, I like to refer to it as the sacred anthem of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. It's a song of great importance for us. It's a song by Narottam expressing this very deep aspiration for the service of of Shri Rupa, right? Who is ultimately the head of that particular servitor section in Goloka Vrindavan, which our gurus aspire to have entrance to. right? And so this song, Shri Rupa Manjaripada, Saraswati Thakur particularly requested Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj to sing that song. Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj, as you know, as always, very shy, he was holding back. Somebody asked another devotee to sing the song, and Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj interrupted, Saraswati Thakur interrupted them. No, I want to hear Śrīdhar Mahārāj sing that song, right? He emphasized. And so then Srila Śrīdhar Mahārāj, hesitatingly began to sing that song. And so in that moment, all the witnesses of that transaction, they could recognize, oh, there's some divine exchange taking place right now, right? And they could recognize that Saraswati Thakur was giving an indication that, my line will continue through him, right? And there was one person there used a phrase, something like mystic power transmission, right? That took place in that moment. And so naturally, after Saraswati Thakur left, many of the godbrothers of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, they turned to him like, oh, we would like you to lead something. But Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj did not want that. He rather supported another godbrother. That didn't work out in the end. And then ultimately Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj withdrew, went into hiding in Navadvip, right? But for some time, I guess it would have been a couple of years, some of his godbrothers were looking for him, right? Trying to seek him out. And they finally found him in Navadvip. And he was living this wonderfully simple life on the banks of the Ganges in Navadvip. There's one place where Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj is talking about this. Somebody asked me actually to find that recording. I that's still on my to-do list, but I had the privilege to hear that some years ago. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj is describing like how he lived his daily life, had this like little tiny hut on the banks of the Ganges, growing some vegetables, and bathing in the Ganges every day. In the daytime, when there was sunlight, he's studying the scriptures, Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures. Then throughout the night, when, there's no electricity, then throughout the night, there's no light, so he's chanting. And he'd also brought these Giriraj Govardhan Shilas from Vrindavan, right? Because he'd left his guru's mission. He spent the month of Kartik in Vrindavan praying in this mood of prayer, where do I go next? And ultimately made that decision with the blessings of Nityananda Prabhu to reside in Navadvip. And so he brought these Shilas, these Govardhan Shilas with him to Navadvip. So he's worshiping this Govardhan Shila, making an offering to him every day, reading the scriptures, chanting, swimming in the Ganges. This was his very simple life that he was living. And then ultimately, some of his godbrothers did find him, and they requested him, what are we going to do? You please, take some position. We need you. We need you to lead us forward. And in the words of Srila Govinda Maharaj, Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, he became a king maker. Because Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj really did not want that position. So what he did was he empowered his godbrothers that you become gurus, right? And he gave sannyas to quite a number of his godbrothers. And if didn't give them sannyas, gave them, the empowerment to begin to act as guru. Some of them had already taken sannyas from Saraswati Thakur. But then so then he gave them all this like backing, like you become guru, you start your missions, you carry this movement forward. And so our Gurudev, Srila Govinda Maharaj, he made this wonderful point, like this was the position of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, that, it's one thing to be a king, that's powerful, but to be a king maker, to have the power to make someone a king, that's something even more. And so that was the position of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. And there was this big circle of leading godbrothers of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj who all turned to him for guidance, right? And they looked to him for blessings, support, and guidance. And there was this one wonderful comment that Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj made. Later on, our mission by the service of Srila Govinda Maharaj, he then joined some years later, 1947, and began to expand and realize Srila Śrīdhar Maharaj's vision of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math. So every year there was this gathering, Vishwa Vaishnava Raja Sabha. It was something that was originally established by Srila Jiva Goswami. And the idea is it's when qualified leading Vaishnavas will come together and consult with one another, share news, and so on. And so this meeting would take place at our mission, Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math, every year after Gaur Purnima. And so many of these very glorious, great leading Vaishnavas, they would come and congregate at our mat in Navadvip. And Śrīla Śrīdhar Maharaj would give the presidential chair to Bhakti Saranga Goswami Maharaj, very great Vaishnava preacher. And Goswami Maharaj, he was a very powerful, bold preacher in Mahaprabhu's mission. And he made this one comment one year in this meeting. He used this expression, Simhavalokan, which means the glance of a lion. And so he was referring to how, lions are these great, powerful preachers, right? Striding on the plain, king of the jungle, right? But if you look at how a lion moves forward, you'll see he's making these powerful paces forward. But every now and again, that lion is throwing this glance behind to assess the terrain that it's walked on, to make sure it's on track and it's going in the right direction. It will pause and then it will continue. And so Bhakti Saranga Goswami, he made this wonderful comment, this is the relationship we all have with Śrīla Śrīdhar Maharaj, that, we are all like these powerful lion-like preachers moving forward and spreading the message of our Guru Maharaj and Mahaprabhu. But every now and again, we're stopping and we're looking to Śrīdhar Maharaj. Is he happy with us? Is he pleased with us? Right? Are we on track? Right? We all want the blessings of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. That was the kind of relationship that Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj had with his godbrothers. So highly regarded and very close connection with very qualified Vaishnavas in the Gaudiya Math. This is the position of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. And we can also mention, and we should mention too, his relationship with Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, because, we're all here by his grace, actually, right? Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, they always had a very close connection. Years before Srila Prabhupada became, world famous preacher and establisher of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, they were good friends for many years before that. And Srila Prabhupada, at the time when he was running his pharmaceutical business, he actually gave one floor of one of his properties to Śrīla Śrīdhar Maharāj to use as a preaching center of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math. So Prabhupada, he actually, you could say, he opened the first outpost of Sri Chaitanya Saraswati Math, right? Sita Kanta Banerjee Lane in Kolkata. And our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj, he would spend a few months of the year there. And our Gurudev actually became the first distributor of Prabhupada's magazine, Back to Godhead, right? But anyhow, that's another conversation. But simply to say, that Śrīla Śrīdhar Maharaj, he had this very close relationship with Prabhupada, and he was a huge supporter also. And Śrīla Prabhupada, he had extremely high regard for Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, and he was someone that Prabhupada turned to for guidance, right? When Swami Maharaj Prabhupada was preaching in America, he would sometimes send letters to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj via Śrīla Govinda Maharaj asking for his specific advice and guidance in certain situations. And then when Swami Maharaj would return to India, he would, visiting Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was always one of his first stops. And he was always turning to him for friendship and also guidance. And at the opening of the Chandradoy Mandir in Mayapur, 1977, at that time he publicly referred to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj as his Shiksha Guru, as his instructing guru. Especially in the absence of his own Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he looked to Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj for advice and guidance. So, this was their relationship, and this is also the position of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. So we're kind of running out of time here, but what else can we say? The glories of exalted persons like Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, they are unlimited, even in the small understanding that we have, we are actually like insects. We just know like a tiny fraction of the glories of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. But even that fraction, that can fill, many hours of discussion, And then lastly, I'd like to say, it's important to say that, our connection is through Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj, right? And, Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj, he was the most beloved disciple and servitor, successor of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. And they were also associates, their relationship really transcended guru-disciple relationship, but they were more like friends and associates. And it is through the grace of Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj that we have the privilege of knowing something of the glories of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, and not just knowing, but feeling like a genuine connection, right? And, it is my own feeling, and I've also heard many others express it, that, we feel that Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was living within Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj, and that in having a relationship with Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj, it automatically included a relationship with Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. Janardhan Mahārāj, he actually made one comment saying that when Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj left, he felt that he'd lost Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj as well as Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj, because Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj was living so much within him. And that is my own feeling also. I never met Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj in person, but I feel very strongly a very living connection with him through Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj, and so, it's important we also remember that on this holy day, through the grace of Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj, then, by serving Śrīla Govinda Mahārāj, we can also hope to receive some mercy and genuine connection from Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj. And this is what else do we live for, but aspiring to render some tiny service to the feet of such exalted souls. Jai Śrīla Bhakti-Rakshak Śrīdhar Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai, Tadiya Tirobhav Mahamahotsavati ki Jai. Well, we have some qualified Vaishnavas in the room, especially Suvasini Didi, but looks like she might be busy. It would be lovely to hear something from you, Suvasini Didi, if you're available.
Dandavad, Didi. That was very beautiful glorification. Very happy to hear. And yeah, what else we can say? It's nothing, we can say we are so indebted to them, always to our Gurudev, and who gave Śrīla Guru Maharaj to us, and only pray that we can be somehow utilized in some small way for their service. What else we can say? That's all. That's all I can say right now.
Thank you, Suhasini Didi. Does anyone else want to share any reflections? And welcome Somya Sham and Vijay. They joined a little later. And also Hadini. And we did have Julian. I think he's popped out again. But would anyone else like to share anything, or maybe has something they'd like to hear more about in connection with Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj? Otherwise, we can end there for today. All right. Happy we can have an online Sangha on this holy day. All glories to the assembled devotees, sincere seekers. All glories to our beloved Gurudev, Śrīla Bhakti Sundar Govindadev Goswami Maharaj, Param Gurudev, Śrīla Bhakti Rakshak Śrīdhar Dev Goswami Maharaj, and also Śrīla Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Prabhupada. Jai Shri Gurudev. Okay, well, wishing you all an inspired week ahead, and look forward to seeing you next week. There's Krishna Chaitanya. Krishna Chaitanya, you want to share anything? I know you're also a very good preacher. Okay. He's feeling shy. Somya, Sham, and Vijay, you're in the middle of preparing for your evening program there, huh?
Dhanyavad Shakadidi, yeah. I can just show there. Yeah, so just we have our just ready for the program this evening.
Okay, Jai.
Yeah, so we're just getting ready. So yeah, so Indrani Didi's cooking, making prasad outside.
Okay.
So, Indrani Didi, the Shakadidi.
Dhanyavad.
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 So yeah, so Ramadas, Jadagopal, they're all coming this evening, but Archie at 6:30. So yeah, so all good. And it's a beautiful sunny day as well. And we had a lovely morning program as well, Remembrance, and that was very nice.
Okay.
Dhanyavad.
Good. Very nice to hear the news from there.
Yeah.
Our Gurudev, he liked to say, the sun never sets on Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Math.
That's true.
And so, our Gurudev also mentioned, like, why did he open so many temples around the world? Only because actually Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj did not want that. Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj did not want so many temples, right? So our Gurudev said, why have I done that? Like going against his will. He said, only so that in each of these temples, the glories of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj can be remembered, right? And so, we're happy to think on this day, we have some devotees in California. They're going to be having an evening program. We have our devotees here in Ireland, and at every phase of the day, the 24-hour clock, there will be remembrance of Śrīla Śrīdhar Mahārāj going on throughout the world, So the sun never sets on the glory of our gurus. So
that's very beautiful, yeah.
So wonderful that you're holding that observance there today, and we're all doing so in our own way, wherever we are.
Yes, absolutely, yes, yeah.
Okay, we'll close there for today. Dhanyavad to all.
Dhanyavad.